Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Weisberg. I am the CEO of the Federation for Jewish Philanthropy of Upper Fairfield County. And I'm really delighted and excited today to welcome you to our webinar, The Unstoppable Startup Meeting Israel's Secret Rules of Chutzpah. It's always exciting as we see the registrants come in for these programs, that one of the beautiful things about a difficult situation is it allows us to have welcome speakers from beyond our community, such as Uri Adoni, and welcome participants from a broad area as well. And as I was watching the registrations come in, was pleased to see registrations not only from Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York, but saw someone registering from Florida and saw someone registering from Kansas, and why not? Because this promises to be a really interesting and intriguing and dare I say important program. Before we get started, I want to thank our wonderful partners. This isn't just a program of the Federation for Jewish Philanthropy of Upper Fairfield County, but we're grateful for our partners, the Jewish Book Council, the Consulate General of Israel to New England, and the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut, whose executive director, Michael Bloom, I'm going to introduce in just a moment. Just a couple of things I want to say before we get started. One is, if you are so intrigued by this webinar that you're moved to purchase Uri Adoni's book, The Unstoppable Startup, we certainly want to encourage you to do so. And the place that we've been encouraging folks to buy their books during the pandemic is a website called bookshop.org that allows you to support your local bookstore. So certainly you can find Uri's book all over the place, but if you're thinking about where should I buy this book from, we'd recommend bookshop.org because it is a wonderful place to support your local bookstore. As we get into the program and you begin to think about questions that you'd like to ask Uri or to ask our host, Cliff Sirlin, please type those questions into the chat feature. And when we get to the last 15 or 20 minutes of the program, we'll start relaying those questions to Cliff and to Uri. And with that being said, I'm going to introduce Michael Bloom from the Jewish Federations Association of Connecticut. Michael, my friend, does a wonderful job leading the advocacy organization that represents our 7 federations throughout Connecticut. And one of the special efforts that Michael has been working on is the effort to launch a Connecticut Israel business exchange. And so I want to bring Michael on just for a minute or two to talk about that concept and what he's envisioning. Michael, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for including me in this program. There is a lot happening in Israel as you have this program as evidence. And it's time that we in Connecticut step up and do more to facilitate and see what's going on in Israel and take advantage of it. My organization, like you said, as well as the state of Connecticut, some business organizations, and some few Jewish federations over the years have dabbled in trying to facilitate business relationships between Connecticut and Israel. They were successful. We have about 10 Israeli companies here in our border, but momentum unfortunately stopped a few years ago. There has been real momentum among leaders in Connecticut to do what other states have done, including our neighbors in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, to create one not-for-profit organization that fosters and strengthens trade, business, academic collaborations, and cultural exchange between Israel and Connecticut to the benefit of both of their and our economies. One organization to deliver for Connecticut companies desiring entry into Israel and giving those Connecticut companies access to the world class technologies and innovative ecosystem that is Israel. Connecticut has many things going for it, which make us believe that this organization will be successful. Connecticut is located 2 hours between New York and Boston, two of the most innovative ecosystems in the United States. And we are far less expensive than both of those places. And if you live down in Fairfield County or even further down in Stamford and Greenwich, you are a 45-minute train ride into Grand Central Station and can access the New York market. We have several strong Jewish communities here in Connecticut, and there are many sectors that Connecticut and Israel do well together, and we hope to capitalize on that and facilitate those relationships. Agriculture, financial technology, cybersecurity, life sciences, and a few others, again, are some that we'll focus on, but we continue to do this. Hopefully it'll get off the ground in the next couple months, but we're very excited and appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Michael, thanks you so much for your leadership. We're excited about it. Maybe some questions will even come up about the Connecticut Israel Business Exchange during this program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Stacy.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our wonderful host for today. He is a member of our Upper Fairfield County Jewish community, and as managing partner of Launch Capital, Cliff Sirlin has created marketplaces and disrupted supply chains across industries. His businesses have spanned energy, dry cleaning, real estate, and publishing. Most recently, he served as the CEO of Domino, and as an active investor, Cliff's investments include Seamless, Envision, Pond 5, Living Social, Atlas Obscura, Greatest, Transactus, Big Fuel, and many others. Cliff received his law degree from the New York University School of Law and an undergraduate degree from Colgate University. Cliff lives in Westport with his wife and their two children. As I said, is a part of a wonderful family in our Jewish community. We're so grateful to have him here. And so I am pleased and honored to introduce Cliff Sirlin.
Hello, David. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I am doing well. It's wonderful to have you. I'm going to get my put him off of the screen here, and we'll bring on Uri Adoni.
Hi there.
Hello, Uri.
How are you doing?
How are you?
All right, thank you.
Welcome, welcome. All right, let's kick this off. And first, let me introduce Uri Adoni. Great, thank you for spending time with us today to speak about your book, which I recently read, The Unstoppable Startup, Mastering Israel's Secret Rules of Chutzpah. And so just as a very quick background, Uri is a venture capitalist as well as a seasoned operator. He has held a number of very interesting positions. Most recently, he was a partner at Jerusalem Venture Partners. Prior to that, his operating experience included being the CEO of MSN Israel and a host of boards that he has sat on. And as we dive in today, we'll look more to learn about Uri's background. And so how I always start off my my questions and my interviews is, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get here? You can go as far back as you'd like. I guess in the introduction, you reference some important rules that your father taught you. So would love to hear your background.
Sure, thanks. So I'm born and raised in Jerusalem many years ago. As you said, I'm a venture capitalist, worked for JVP for over 13 years. It's one of Israel's largest funds, 1.4 billion under management with just over $20 billion in exit value and, you know, IPOs in NASDAQ, M&As, many companies that never made it, the whole VC story, but nice returns overall. After I finished, I kind of left JVP a couple of years ago. I was working actually in the US with actually bringing some of the Israeli ecosystem kind of know-how to the US, to a couple of cities in Miami and Jersey City, coming back to Michael's initiative, which I think is great, trying to build these bridges between Israel and the US, which I think that today there's a great opportunity kind of to change the default of New York, Boston, and the Valley, and to actually I think there are great opportunities in other cities and states as well. And just recently, a couple of months ago, I've launched a new fund called Sanara Capital, which is focusing on digital health and bioconvergence. So this is what I'm doing now.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. So, Uri, tell us, why did you write the book?
Good question. I think main two reasons. One is that there is a statistics that shows that 75% of the startups don't make it. And I think as you kind of get your experience, you can see some of the mistakes that the entrepreneurs are doing, and you kind of want to help them not do that. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of contribute my 2 cents to reduce this number and share some of my experience, but mainly some other very talented entrepreneurs' experience. And so that just new founders, new entrepreneurs can learn from our knowledge, our mistakes, and our know-how. The second reason was that before the pandemic, we have been hosted, I don't know, hundreds of delegations from all over the world, and they will keep asking, what's the secret sauce of Israel? How come Israel has become the second largest high-tech hub in the world, and being such a small country and still so very dominant in the tech world? And when you explain, you talk about the ecosystem and about the talent and about the universities and etc. One thing that I found that really differentiates us from other ecosystems is the culture. And within this culture, I thought that the chutzpah is an interesting kind of thing that we have, for better or worse. There's we'll talk about, there's a negative and a positive side to it. But when you talk to entrepreneurs, you always hear the successful ones always have their chutzpah story, how chutzpah actually made their business and their startup succeed. And so I thought that it's worth writing about it and share this kind of experience and knowledge.
Great, terrific. Well, I think that's a natural transition into the thesis behind the book, which is this concept of chutzpah. So why don't we spend some time actually diving in? And a quick personal anecdote about chutzpah. My grandmother, when I was younger, always would turn to me and say, Clifford, because my formal name is Clifford, but she pronounced it with the Bronx accent. She said, Clifford, you've got chutzpah. You know what that means? And I'd always kind of nod and say yes, but I don't think I really was able to define it. And so you've done this wonderful job of actually defining chutzpah, but chutzpah in and of itself is amorphous. So help us through the way in which chutzpah is sprinkled throughout the Israeli startup ecosystem and what it actually means and how you attack breaking it down into its different pieces.
Yeah, so I to your grandmother's remark, I think that any good entrepreneur have chutzpah, whether they know it or not, or whether they know how to call it or not. It's kind of a cultural thing and a mindset thing. I think that if you try to translate it, it's hard. But the closest word I found was audacity, or go-to approach. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a negative side to it and a positive side to it. The negative side is being arrogant or rude, which is not good, obviously. And this is not the part that I'm referring to. But I think the positive side of chutzpah is having this confidence in a way, and the mindset to actually challenge what is currently the status quo, what the current reality is. And you have to have this audacity to say, you know what, yeah, these things have been working for X amount of years, but I think we could improve them. I think that with a new technology, we should do that. I think that there's a new need and we should meet them. So the fact that you look at the reality in a certain way as an entrepreneur and say, I'm not pleased with that and I want to change that. I think this is kind of in the core of chutzpah. And one of the examples I give in the book is a company called Waze that I think some of you have heard. It's a navigation system. when Uri Levin and his partner started it back in 2007, 8, everybody told them that it's a bad idea. There's GPS, there's Google Maps. Why do you need another system that will tell you how to get from A to B? And they said, but it's not a good solution. They just, the current solutions tell me the shortest way, but not the shortest time. So I get stuck into traffic jams that I don't want to be in, but I only know it when I'm in it. I want to know it beforehand. And so the feedbacks initially were very kind of negative for them. Said, no, nobody will share their data. Nobody will let you know where they are. Why would they do that? And they thought, there's a pain in the world that they should solve called traffic jams and getting faster to wherever you want to go. And they were persistent with it. And eventually they have created this platform that, fast forward a few years, were bought by Google over $1 billion sale. So it's just again, it's a small example, and there's many of them. I can, give a few others, but how entrepreneurs look at the world and say, I'm not happy with what I see. And sometimes it's just personal experience to say, if I don't like it, there's probably another few millions of people, if not more, that are not happy with that. And let's try to change it and come up with a better solution and address the pains that is or an unmet need.
Sure. When you speak about ways, I think that having spent some time in Israel and now living in Upper Fairfield County, I think those are the two places with the worst traffic in the entire world. So it is a true pain point, and I'm sure others that are on this call can appreciate that as well. So another point that you made with regards to Uri Levin and starting Waze, one of his quotes is, "A startup is a journey of failures," and that quote actually jumped out at me and is an incredibly important quote. You've been an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur. As a founder, it's wonderful to think everything is up and to the right and it's a linear path. But can you speak about your own personal experiences with regards to failure and how it's made you stronger?
Sure. I think that, in a way, coming back to Uri's quote, I think that it's not just, I see failure only when you give up. This is when you failed. I mean, there are challenges on the way. There are hurdles on the way. It's a crazy roller coaster. But as long as you keep riding it, you haven't failed. So you failed if the company was shut down or if you gave up. Until then, you keep trying, various ways, like Edison did with his, electric bulb. So I think that in that perspective, one of the things that you learn is probably to be a bit modest, because nobody always gets it right, and you should be very listenative to the market and what the market tells you. And there was I'll give you an example of a company that we invested in, and it was kind of we thought it a slam dunk because it was like a company that in the media space that enabled websites to create more capital out of their existing advertising inventory, and said, what, we're just going to optimize your inventory in such a way that you can double your income. And you say, okay, and the technology work. And we said, that's, it's 100% win. Who wouldn't want to earn more? And then when we actually went to the market, it was much harder because, companies didn't want to allocate all their inventory. Some of them were afraid of adding the code into their site. Some of them needed to really get some support that it wasn't worth, a small site. You cannot have all the support in the world and all the time in the world. So eventually it was, the company eventually was shut down because it wasn't addressing the market the way, we thought it should. So definitely and that's the failure, it's a company that never made it. But I think there are other stories where you start your journey and there are challenges. There's always challenges. But I think that's probably one of the most important things, that you need to know how to listen to the market and what the market is telling you. And if you're starting to feel or you get some rejection from the market, make sure that you hear them, listening to them, absorb them and make the changes or pivot as much as needed in order to get on the right path, because it takes time. It's usually not in the first bullet that you hit your target. And so, from the companies that we did eventually IPO'd and we did, sell and did large M&As, it was always the case of very good kind of musical-eared entrepreneurs that listened to the market, made the changes at the right time, listened to the customers, listened to the needs, listened to the consumers. And that was kind of, and this is probably what makes you most sensitive to the market and being agile to give the right responses at the right time.
For sure. One of the other themes that you call out in your book is having a comfort level with living with uncertainty. And I think that is an incredibly astute point, especially if you're planning to be an entrepreneur. And to your comments that you just made with regards to having a plan and then bringing it to market and the uncertainty associated with that, if you could provide a little more comment on that insight, I think it'd be really valuable for us to hear.
Sure. I think that, as species, I guess we would like to, we feel most comfortable in the places that we know, and the more we can anticipate and plan, then we feel most comfortable. I think in Israel specifically, because there's so many things changing around us constantly, we kind of got used to live in some kind of an uncertainty. And even when we have some, war in the South, or you see that even the stock market doesn't react to that. So it's still, strong, because people are not that, all right, so, they're shooting missiles on us. Nobody likes it, but you kind of have this flexibility in a way to live with uncertainties and change of plans. And as an entrepreneur, you should definitely be comfortable with that, because it's a constant moving target. And you need to make sure that you are flexible enough and you're confident enough and you are and you have the capability, and your team have the capability to address the changes in the market in such a way that it wouldn't threaten you, but on the other side, it will be a great opportunity for you to seize. So actually, these uncertainties, we see them as opportunities, not as a threat in most cases, because maybe other companies wouldn't react as fast as we will, and we'll get the market first, or we'll get the solution first. So in a way, any change in the market, I think if you analyze it the right way and you can address it in the right way, it could be a huge opportunity rather than a threat.
Yep, completely agree. Let's touch on one of the other underpinnings of the Israeli society that you call out in the book and that we all are aware of, with regards to the mandatory service of the IDF, and what that means from both a individual perspective and the time that people like yourself spend in the military and what it teaches you, and wrap it into the chapter in which you spoke about the ultimate objective of the IDF, which is to complete the mission. Obviously, it's a very powerful statement. You highlight the importance of decentralized decision-making, which is far different than most traditional military organizations, and how that has an impact ultimately on the individuals that come out of the military, decide to go into business, and how they think about the challenges that they face in business.
Yeah, so I was any Israeli goes, or almost any Israeli goes to the army when they're 18 for a few years, and I was a commander of a combat unit for quite a few years, and I think that one of the things that is, like you mentioned, is very powerful in the IDF culture. It's actually that you would expect that the highest thing or highest goal in the army would be to follow the orders, and you should, but that's not the main thing in the IDF. The IDF, as you said, if you need to summarize the whole, the whole culture, is to complete the mission. That's it. And you can actually improvise. You can change the plan. You can do whatever you want, as long as you will complete your mission. And the interesting thing about it is that you are being trained for it. So, for example, if you have a 5-day drill and you have a plan, then you read all the maps, and you have this part of the army will help you, and the Air Force or whatever, and then half day of the first day of the drill, they start change the things. They say, okay, you don't have this ammunition. The weather has changed. You don't have that kind of backup. You have a few soldiers that are wounded or whatever. And then you need to improvise as you go along with the drill. Now, happened to be that in real life, in real combat, this is what happens. Real combats never go by the plan. And so when you are in real combat, you are already being trained to improvise and to be flexible in your thinking. And it's very important, because when you're under fire, you don't want to be, it shouldn't be the first time that you're thinking in a flexible manner. So the fact that you've been trained for it, and the fact that you are 100% targeted at completing your mission, this is, I can't stress it enough. It's kind of unthinkable for a commander to take the radio and say, I haven't completed the mission. It's something that you don't even think about it. It's so powerful kind of in you. And so when you have this mindset of this mission completion thing, it not only serves you when you're, in your whatever, in hostile territories, and you have missions that you need to complete, or whatever, somebody needs to pick you up in the middle of the night, and there's bad weather and the helicopter cannot land, and you need to, so you train for that to some extent. But when you take this to a startup, this is highly powerful, because the mission completion mindset is within you. So I have this, we had the CEO of a company. We talked it was like 12 o'clock, I think, Israel at the time. But it was 7 o'clock Israel. He just finished a call with Amazon. It was 9 o'clock in Seattle, and he said, I just finished a call. It was a great call. I think I need to meet with them in order to close the deal. 5 hours later, he was on a plane to Seattle, 17-hour flight, just for one meeting in order to close it. So he was very, very like, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. And it goes all the way. It's not just the CEO or the management. You see the engineers, or the code writers, or the salespeople. They work, nights and weekends, but they have their mission, and they will complete it no matter what. And I think this is, and coming back to the previous point about being flexible, your mission may change on the go, and you have to be flexible with that and still be very determined in order to make it happen. So I think that there's, even when hiring people to run startups, there's a lot of investors in Israel that actually prefer a combat unit commander to run their startup, even if they don't have any business experience, rather than somebody who had an experience, but it's just a manager. So I think that a leader, I would say, versus a manager, I think as an investor, you'll always prefer a leader. And when you have somebody with this kind of mindset, it gives you the confidence that they will, make the right calls at the right time.
For sure. Staying consistent with the marriage of the military to the creation of amazing products and R&D. One of Israel's greatest successes was the creation of the Iron Dome. And you spend a fair amount of time speaking about Dr. Danny Gold in the book and his journey to actually create the Iron Dome. Can you share some light on that? You're obviously more familiar with that story than most, and I think that when we celebrate the successes of Israel, the story behind the Iron Dome is just one that is beyond just the monetization of brilliant ideas or technology. This actually saves lives, which is most important.
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of people in the world that can say that with their invention, they've literally saved probably thousands of lives. Danny is an amazing person. He he came with this idea. Israel was bombarded with missiles, both from Lebanon in the Second Lebanon War, and then later from Gaza. And it was like thousands of rockets were falling from the sky on civilians and on cities, and he thought that this is unacceptable. Coming back to changing the reality and the status quo, and he said, I want to create this system that will and it will enable to hit the rocket while in the sky before it falls into the ground. And everybody told him that he cannot do it, that it's impossible, physically it's impossible, because the missiles are too quick to land, and you don't have the computing power to understand where they're coming from, where they're going to launch a missile to draw them and get it right. So he didn't get any budget. But as he was leading the technological unit, he had his own kind of he took aside a budget without any approval. Again, talking about chutzpah, and he created this little team that started working on this idea. And he tried to sell it to the government. He tried to sell it to the Americans. Everybody told him not possible. After relatively a short time, I think it was 18 months, 2 years, something like that, he came out with a demo that actually showed that it's possible. Not only it's possible, the system was so smart that it can actually forecast where the missile is going to, and then decide whether they want to put it down or not. So if it's going to the sea, no need to waste an anti-missile for that. And so they saw that it's possible, which everybody told him he can, and he built the system. Now, one of the interesting stories, he was saying that in order to they need to improvise because they didn't have a lot of budget. And one of the things he said that they bought some of the components within the Iron Dome are parts that were bought in Toys R Us. So they went to buy some remote control, whatever, cars or whatever, and they created these system out of Toys R Us. Not everything, obviously, but some of the components are actually things that they bought in Toys R Us and took apart and used it for it. And there are some really nice videos on YouTube that you saw how people were running in panic before the Iron Dome, before the siren went off, and like you have 15 seconds if you're in the south, or 30 seconds if you're in Tel Aviv to run for shelter, and everybody was like screaming and running. And after the Iron Dome, that everybody goes quietly to maybe a safer place, but it literally changed the lives, our lives, whenever we have some kind of a conflict in the south or in the north. So it's an amazing example of how the Israeli chutzpah actually served us in the best way possible.
Yeah, just an amazing story, incredible story. So, question about chutzpah, and I believe that you make this argument in the book. Can it be taught, or is it something that's just inherent and natural for an individual?
Yeah, well, that's my hypothesis, but I think it is. It could be taught. I think that unlike charisma, that people are either born with it or not. You cannot teach somebody to be charismatic. I think chutzpah is something, because it's a mindset. It's something that you can teach and you can train, and you can have somebody saying, okay, now do this instead of do that, or instead of give up, or instead of let go, don't. And on the other side, don't be arrogant, don't be rude. That's not the right way. So you can definitely teach it. I think that, as previously said, I think that any good entrepreneur has the chutzpah. They don't necessarily know to call it this way, but they have it, because otherwise they probably wouldn't have been successful. And so I think that the fact that you can have this mindset explained and show examples, and and say, okay, this is not necessarily the way that things should work. I can do better than that. I think that this is something that can be taught. one of the examples I give is a company called Cyactive, which again, I think it's a great example of how you challenge existing status quo, because the antivirus world, the way it worked was that you have hackers taking existing virus. 97% of the new viruses are actually mutations of old viruses. And so, and then the antivirus company comes and kind of try to block it. And then the hackers come and change another virus. And then it's a cat and mouse, it's a kind of cat and mouse thing. And what Cyactive did was they said, let's look at the whole thing from a different perspective. And let's take the viruses, the existing viruses that the hackers are mutating. We will mutate. We will make the mutations. We will create tens of thousands of potential viruses, and then we can create a blocker that will block these viruses that doesn't yet exist, but they could be developed. And then all these hackers will come up with this kind of new viruses. They will be blocked because we already developed them. And they created the software, and it worked really quite amazing. And the company was bought like after 16 months from inception, very, very quickly. So I think that the fact that you can tell somebody, and by the way, I would say one more thing. The main challenge is, or the main blockage, it's in the mind. Technology today can almost do anything. But when you say, okay, I have a concept that I want to print food, or I want to print, organs, this is something, it's a mindset. It's this is kind of, is it science fiction or whatever? But so when you have this crazy idea, so to speak, but you say, okay, why, just yesterday, actually, I saw a really interesting company that it has this technology from stem cells that they want to create blood. So you don't need to have donors of blood, and which is a huge problem in the world, because every donation of blood lasts for anywhere between 14 to 30 days, and that's it. And when you need a lot of blood, you don't necessarily have it. So they create blood like without taking it from anywhere. So the fact that you come up this, again, with really innovative ideas, this is usually what makes the innovation happen. Yeah, there are definitely challenges with developing the technology, but I think that the main blockage is the mental one. And so the Chutzpah mindset, in a way, frees you or release you in a way to kind of think in a very open way, in a very bold way, to say, you know what, I want to change the world, so to speak, and not just as a phrase, literally, in whatever, in food, in storage, in enterprise software, in medical device, or any other space that you're in, cyber, whatever. So I definitely think it can be taught and could be trained. And I think, by the way, it's not that long of a lesson. It's just been, you need a mentor that will just direct you, say, here, you need to push more than that. You need to give a little bit more chutzpah. Don't be that polite. You can do better than that. So perfect. I think, I think it definitely can be taught.
One of my favorite quotes in the book was, learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist, which I think is to your point. So I have one last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to a series of questions that have come in during our discussion. So my question is really about the future. And when we look back on what's happened in Israel, the country is 76 years old. Is that right? I hope I have my math right.
74 it will be.
74,
48.
okay.
Yeah.
Just an incredible story. Obviously, its founding, and but when you think about Israel, Israel has always been the David and Goliath story. And now, with the success that Israel has enjoyed over the past 15 years, how does that impact the future? And how does chutzpah is, as we've discussed, it's something that's sprinkled through the water tables within Israel, and it's an important component. How do you think about Israel on a going forward basis now that there are some spoils of success, and what impact does that have?
I think there's a few things that we need to do, and some of them we are doing. I think that probably in the last, I don't know, 20 years, maybe a bit more, we had kind of some kind of advantage of a first-time mover in a way, that we have a great high-tech ecosystem. We had funds, we had government support. We had, you have universities, IPs, intellectual properties turning into companies. And we were very strong at the ideation phase, at the seed stage, A round stage. So relatively young companies, and we were doing well at this stage. I think that many countries have caught up with that. So you can find a lot of ecosystems today around the world, whether it's US, Europe, the Far East, Southeast Asia, Latin America. So you see all these ecosystems emerging. And so I think the role of Israel now is like to come up and be, I would say, from a startup nation to become a scale-up nation. So to kind of lead the world in the next phase, and to show how we grow companies, and not just incept them and then sell them relatively quickly. And we actually see it happen. The amounts of IPOs and unicorns that we've just seen in the last year was break record in terms of the number of large companies that haven't been sold. They were IPO'd, so they become public, but they're still running. So I think in that sense, we are on the right track, but we need to be very focused on that and make sure that we kind of grow the companies in the right way and not sell them too early. The other thing is to try to find kind of new disciplines, and again, to try to lead on them. One of the things that is now happening, and I'm happy to be part of that new discipline in a way with a new fund, is as a discipline that the Israeli Innovation Authority, what used to be the chief scientist, defined as the next big thing for Israel in the next 10 years, and it's called bioconvergence. Now, bioconvergence is something that it's a new discipline. It's a multidiscipline discipline in a way that actually converges between biotech and high tech. So anything to do with wet biology on one hand, molecules, all these things that belong to the wet biology side, with high tech, which is nanobots delivering drugs in your body, printing organs. It can be anything, computational AI, analyzing data, predictive analytics, all these kind of things that kind of used to be a high tech thing. We're now converging them. So again, just to give you an example, we have one of our companies is a company that's developing eye drops that will replace glasses and contact lenses. So you just put drops in your eyes and that's it. You don't need glasses anymore. So it's still in the trials. It hasn't been proved, but it's worked on the animal case studies, and it worked well. So hopefully it'll go well in the men and the human trials as well. But just it's a physical thing with a biological thing that creates this thing. So this definition of this new discipline, I think, will enable Israel, like we did with cybersecurity in the last 10 years, that we were early to detect it and defined it as a kind of a national mission, so to speak, to create these technologies on cybersecurity. I think that now in anything that has to do with healthcare and all these bioconvergence things that are happening, it's something that Israel could lead and should lead. Otherwise, we will lose our advantage. So we still need to run fast. It's not that we can just lay back and rest.
Terrific.
Uri,
great answer.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and as you might imagine, we have a whole list of questions coming in that I hope we'll have time for any time. So first, from Ruth, what's the biggest piece of advice you have for someone a few years out of college wanting to break into the venture capital world?
It's a good question, because I would say there's two disciplines in a way. One is that try to build your career only in the VC space, and the other one says you need to have some operational background. I actually believe in the second one, because I think that when you sit with a startup or with a CEO on the board and you talk about, go-to-market strategy, sales strategy, channels, all that, you shouldn't know it only on a theoretical basis, but you should know what it means to sell. You should know what it means to, get a customer. And I think that operational background is actually important in order to be a good investor. It's not a must, but that's my own belief. There are great investors that never been operational and they do well as well. So it's not a must, but I think that you would do a better job as an investor, as a venture capitalist, if you have some kind of operational background. It could be to start with that. It could be that you start as an analyst or associate, and then you go to work in a startup or a company, and then come back to be a partner in a VC or something like that. But
Yep.
I would say try to get some operational experience, because that will serve you greatly after as an investor. Because the main challenges at the end of the day of startups are when you go to the market, when you meet the customer, when you need the channels. It's not just about developing the technology. And the operational side is critical to the success of a startup and the investment you made. So I would encourage to go to some kind of operational, maybe work for a startup, and then understand what's the DNA of a startup, and only then kind of take a route to the investor side of the game.
I second that. Great. We have a bunch of other questions that are coming in. I know that we're going to be short on time, but the next question is from Leslie. Can bold framing of objectives be another way of thinking about chutzpah?
Can what? Sorry, I'm not sure I got the question.
Can bold framing of objectives be another way of thinking about chutzpah?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that having a big, hairy, bold is something that is helping again your mindset not to be stuck beyond your comfort zone. I was once in some kind of brainstorming session, and the moderator said something that I really liked. He said, give us the idea that you think will get you fired. So come up with some crazy idea that you think if you bring it up, you'll get you. And from this idea, that wouldn't necessarily be the idea that you will eventually implement, but that would open your mind to thinking really in a bold way, in a challenging way, in a big way. And as venture capitalists, we like big visions, and only the companies that actually had bold goals eventually make it. Not every company that has a bold goal succeeds, but the companies that makes it big are the ones that had bold goals. So I think definitely a bold goal is a good start. And even when you have the bold goal, try to push it even further. Try to stretch it. Try to say, okay, this is bold. Let's do even bolder. Let's go crazier. Let's think even, what else can we do with that? And if you look at, where science is going these days, is like really mind-blowing in every aspect you can think of, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's deep learning, whether it's chips that can be planted into your body, cyborg, all sorts of things that we were never thought, autonomous cars, obviously, that it's still, even though we talk a lot about it, didn't happen yet. But all these things that are, again, technologies, I would say almost everything, maybe except for teleporting, everything is almost possible. Maybe that will happen one day as well. But so yeah, I would go for bold goals, and even I would start with a bold goal and then push from that even further.
Well, I guess we have Star Trek for our inspiration for teleporting.
Yeah, exactly.
This next question is from Paula, and she asks, can you name some Israeli companies to invest in?
Oh, there's I wouldn't do justice. It really depends on the reason it's hard to answer this question, because there's a lot of questions I need to ask you before that. What stage are you interested? High risk, low risk? What kind of space? What kind of are you want to be a follower or a leader? Do you want to take the lead or not? It's too much of a broad question, but I can assure you that out of the 5,000-6,000 companies that are out there today, there are many of them that worth investing in, and you can either invest through the funds and invest in the fund. You can invest directly in the companies, but it really depends what kind of investor you are, what kind of checks, what space you're interested in, what kind of risk you're interested in, et cetera, et cetera. So it wouldn't be, I would say, professional for me to just give a names of companies without knowing what is it that you as an investor are looking for.
Fair enough. And our next question is from Jonathan. You mentioned your military background being beneficial. What other educational backgrounds can help you be successful as an entrepreneur?
I think that any practical education, and I know that there are many, universities and programs that having some kind of internships programs and things that make you actually be hands-on. I would support that. For example, I have a good friend of mine is a senior, I think, vice dean in MIT, and not far from you have this program called the Israel Lab, and it's for the MBA Sloan School, and they actually work for Israeli startups for, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, and they get the experience, hands-on. They get a project, they get some kind of an objective, and they need to come up with recommendations or solution. So I think the kind of I would say not just the theoretical one. Theoretical is important. I mean, MBA, finance, all these things are important and are practical. You use them after that. But I would look for some programs that have an operational kind of side to it, with a hands-on kind of experience, because this gives you a lot of experience that you would never get out of just the textbooks.
Terrific. Uri, what else can we've done? I've asked all the questions.
Cliff, I do have one.
Yeah,
Cliff, I do have one
David.
more question that I've
Sure.
seen come in. It came in from Stacy wanting to know, Uri, do you have a sense of the percentage of Israeli women that are involved in startups, or is it still a male-dominated field?
Unfortunately, I would say it's still a male-dominated, but we do see a trend of a growing number of female entrepreneurs, also female, partners in VC. So I think there's more and more female that are, women who are engaging in it, and I'm very supportive of that. At the time, they invested in a team that just women, because we really wanted to support them. By the way, not because they were women, because they had a great company and they were great entrepreneurs. So I think that it's a trend that is happening, but I would say I wish it was faster, but it takes time. But it is a growing trend, and we see more and more women entrepreneurs. And women in managerial position in startups, part of management, women investors. So it's going on the positive side, but I wish it was faster than it's actually happening.
And one last question, building upon the possibility of the Connecticut Israel Business Exchange. If someone came to you and said, I'm interested in doing business with Israel for the first time, what's the top 2 or 3 quick things that I should know about differences in Israeli business culture or working with Israelis in general? What are the quick things that you would tell them? These are the most important things to know.
So it really depends what it means. I would like to work with Israel, because you don't need the Israeli market. So you have the US market. So what you would probably want the Israeli side, it could be developers, it could be technical people, it could be IP, the intellectual property, it could be some kind of collaboration with an existing company. I think one of the challenges, and we've seen it with some of our companies, that you have like vice versa. It's Israeli companies that are going and growing in the US, and then you have a US operation, an Israeli operation. usually I would say the biggest challenge is actually the culture. And, coming back to the chutzpah thing that we talked about, sometimes American can get offended by Israelis because of, we're too direct, we're too loud. I was once in a in a meeting in the U.S. and there were a few Americans and a few Israelis, and we were talking at some stage. It was like a break, and we were talking Hebrew. And one of the guys asked me, "So, what are you fighting about?" And we never, I thought, we're not fighting, we're just chatting. And they thought we were actually fighting and arguing, and it was like our normal everyday. So sometimes there's this cultural gap between, I think, the way that we communicate. So I think that in that perspective, you should make sure that you're aware of that. You should make sure that you're open to this kind of culture, and you don't say, okay, they don't understand us, or they don't understand us, and which happened quite a few times with Israeli companies that built a U.S. operation. But other than that, I think that whether you're looking for an Israeli investor, that could be of relevance as well. I think that. I think there's not that much of a difference. Maybe one more thing. I think maybe our sense of urgency sometimes is higher than others, because we really know that we need to run fast and then accelerate. Otherwise, we won't win the market. So that always, again, that also may create some kind of, well, why are you pushing me? Why? But we really have a high sense of urgency with a startup. So I think that's, and again, it's a cultural thing. It's not, I don't think there's technical things that you should be concerned about, but you just need to be aware, I think, of the cultural differences and make sure that there's a good way to gap them. And this also goes through to this, the Israeli Kinetic initiative, which I think is great, because many Israeli companies need this help of kind of penetrating the U.S. market and expanding there and scaling there. And this kind of landing pad, so to speak, in Connecticut can be a huge help for these companies. So there's definitely a need for that. And I'm sure there will be a great openness for that from the Israeli companies. But like anything, you need to, package it in the right way and market it aggressively enough so it will hit the right ears and create this bridge of companies and entrepreneurs that will actually land in Connecticut rather than in New York or the Valley.
Cliff, Uri, on behalf of the Federation for Jewish Philanthropy of Upper Fairfield County and all of our attendees, I want to thank you for a fascinating hour that was full of important and valuable information. I want to thank again our partners at the Jewish Book Council, the Jewish Federation Association of Connecticut, and the Consulate General of Israel to New England, and all of our attendees today. And I want to remind everyone, if you haven't done so already, to go to bookshop.org or wherever you buy books, online or even in person these days, and ask, where can I find The Unstoppable Startup by Uri Adoni. A fascinating book, a fascinating topic, and I hope that today's webinar will prove to be a launching pad for those who are looking to get involved in working with Israeli businesses and investing in startups. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Uri.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for this.
Thank you,
program.
David. Thanks, Cliff. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.